Welcome to the House of Truth. Last week we looked at we looked at mostly what Paul said about marriage, and mostly what Paul said. There's a little dash of Peter thrown in there as well. This week we're going to look at another issue concerning a woman. This one being Esther, and we're going to look at Purim. And some people have said it has been said by some that we shouldn't celebrate Purim because it's not one of the feast of the Lord in Leviticus 23. So we're going to explore this. We're going to look at Purim. We're not that's true. And if Purim should be celebrated, how? So let's just go and get started. Leviticus 23, 1 through 4. And the Lord said to Moses, spoken to Moses, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, say to them concerning the feast of the Lord, which you shall proclaim of your to be holy convocations. Even these are my feast. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons. So, all right, so first thing we need to notice here is this word feast. What is that word? What is that word? The Hebrew word is not in his case, not kag, which we'll discuss later, but it's moedim. It's moedim. Moedim. Now, moed is literally an appointment, and the Greek word it's translated to in the Septuagint, it means appointment. It's appointment or a rehearsal. And a rehearsal can have two senses. You can be rehearsing something that's going to happen, like rehearsing a play, so you're practicing, or it can be rehearsing something that has happened, like a reenactment of a Civil War battle, where they're rehearsing the battle, how it went. So these are appointments. An appointment, of course, and we'll go on that a little. But look at these appointments. One of those characteristics, the first appointment is a weekly appointment, the Sabbath. What are you supposed to do on these appointments? You're supposed to have a holy convocation, a holy assembly. So these are even holy assemblies. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to know about them. They're appointments, not holidays. Celebration, the word literally means appointments. Now let's take a look at some more of these appointments. Leviticus 23, 5 through 8. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. On the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. But you may make an offering made by fire to the Lord 7 days. In the seventh day of the holy convocation you shall do no servile work therein. Okay, so I want you to know some things. We got essentially three. We got two different types of appointments here. One is a 1 day appointment, the 14th day at the even. So it really starts when the 14th day ends, and the 14th day is really preparation. Because it contrary to not following the norm. Passover is done in the home at night. Everything else is done in public during the day, particularly in a particular place, which we'll get into later. So on the 15th day, the appointment doesn't have just a time, but a place. You notice there's a particular time here, the 15th day and the 14th day of the first month. And notice that you have a holy convocation. So now you got a week appointment, and then inside that week appointment, you have two 1 day appointments, the first day and the seventh day. And you have, and on those days, the appointment's all week, but on those 2 days, you also have an assembly of his worshipers. Okay, now we're looking at the next set. The next one's, because there's more here in Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23, 10 through 14. Speaking of the children of Israel and saying to them, When you come into the land which I give you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. You shall weigh the sheaf before the Lord, and be accepted unto you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. And you shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf of a lamb, a he lamb without blemish, the first year, for a burnt offering on the Lord. And the meat offering there shall be 2/10 deals of fine flour mingled with oil, an offering made by fire unto the Lord for a sweet savor. And the drink offering thereof shall be of wine, and the fourth part of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor parched corn or green ears until the selfsame day that you have brought an offering unto your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. So now we got another one of these appointments here. And this is, of course, Shavuot in Hebrew for the weeks here that it mentions. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumped ahead. This is first fruits, Bekarim, because called that because of the sheaf, which means sheaves. All right, and notice it's sheaves. It's not you bring a sheaf. Well, who? The children of Israel. All the farmers, not just a single sheaf between all of them, a sheaf per farmer, because the rule here is you're not to reap till you get the sheaf in. The first fruit of the harvest, and again, the first fruits is for all the farmers. I'm not going to branch into that today, except stating this. You can study this out yourself and see it's the case. They stacked them up. So we got another one here, and again, notice that, but the day of this one is a set day, an appointed day, but it's not like the others, where it's not a day of the week. It is a particular day of the week. We'll look at that, but it's not the particular day of every week, and it's not a particular day of the month. It's the day after the Sabbath that follows Passover. So, or you could just say the Sunday that occurs during the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So, and so notice this, it's forever. Okay, now let's look at the next one, Leviticus 23:15 through 17. And you count you tomorrow after the Passover, from the day that you brought forth the sheaf of the wave offering, 7th Sabbath shall be complete. And unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days. You shall offer a meat offering unto the Lord. You shall bring out your habitations 2 loaves of 2/10 dill. You shall have fine flour, and you shall be baked with leaven. They are first fruits unto the Lord. All right, well, the first one there was first fruits, and this was Yeshua as the first fruits of those who rose from the dead, not the only fruits. The rest follow. So so the rest of the harvest followed after people brought their first fruits in. There wasn't just one. It's like Yeshua was not dwelling alone. Well, here we're talking about Pentecost, as people would say in English, which comes from the Greek word Pentecost, which means 50th day. 50th day because it's number 50 days. In Hebrew, Shavuot, meaning sevens or Sabbaths, and there we are. Sabbaths, and there we are, 7 Sabbaths. Okay, so this is why they're called that. And notice that this one here again doesn't have a particular day of the month. Now the rabbis teach the 6th day of the 3rd month, because they take the Sabbath, the Sabbath that you do it after to be the first fruits, and you count from there. But Yaakov plainly just said the 3rd day, the 6th day of the 3rd month. That's what he meant. No, he told you to go through this counting business. So you come again on another Sabbath, another day after the Sabbath, another Sunday in our modern calendars. So that's the next one. Now let's look at there's more. We're not done yet. Leviticus 23:24 through 29 tells us about some more. Speaking of the children of Israel, saying in the 7th month, the 1st day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of the blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no work therein, but you shall offer an offering of fire made unto the Lord. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, also on the 10th day of the 7th month, there should be a day of atonement. It should be a holy convocation. You shall afflict your souls and make an offering made by fire unto the Lord. You shall do no work in that same day. Is the day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whatsoever so shall not be afflicted on the same day shall be cut off from among his people. Okay, so this first one here is notice blowing of trumpets, and literally it's that's translation blowing. It's literally alarming, which could be done with trumpets, like blowing the trumpet to sound the sound to alert everyone the attack's underway. It can also be shouting, whatever. But it's literally the day of alarming, the memorial of alarming, and we'll find out what that's about. You need to go back to my previous one I did on Purim, or on trumpets, on the Feast of Trumpets. Well, the rabbis teach that call this Rosh Hashanah, but look, it says plainly here the first day of the 7th month. That comes from, that came from Babylon. We'll discuss that a little bit more later. And the other one here is the Day of Atonement. And the Day of Atonement, you have the big feature is fasting, but notice you have a convocation in both of these. So now we're almost done. We got one more set here. Also, on the 15th day of the 7th month, we have gathered the fruit of the land. You shall keep a feast to the Lord 7 days. And the first day shall be on Sabbath. On the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. You shall take to you on the first of the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees, and willows of the brook. You shall rejoice for the Lord your God 7 days. And you shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days in the year. And it shall be a statute forever in your generation. You shall celebrate in the 7th month. You shall dwell in booths 7 days. All Israelite born shall dwell in booths. Your generation may know that I've made the children of Israel dwell in booths, and I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Okay, this one here is, in English, people call it the Feast of Tabernacles. Sukkot would be more appropriate in Hebrew, which just means tabernacle or booths, more literally. And I discussed in detail during the Feast of Tabernacles. I think you can go watch that one if you want. That explains in detail how you're supposed to do this. But it's sufficient to say you're supposed to do it. So now in Leviticus, what we got the Sabbath. We have seven named feasts, but some of these feasts actually have other days in them. Like this one here, the 8th day. The 8th day is almost a separate, as a holiday, like a holiday within a holiday. And again, Shemini Atzeret, you can go look that Atzeret. You can go look that up. I got a teaching about that back there as well to get clarification on that. But these are these are the only ones listed. These are the only appointments listed in Leviticus 23. And they are the only things in the Torah called appointments exactly. But now I want you to notice their characteristics. They have an appointed day, whether it be they have an appointed time, whether it be a day of the month, a day of the week, or a day based on some sort of some sort of relative day as opposed to an absolute day, like an absolute day of the month, a relative day to that. They have an appointed place as well. And notice that most of them, you have to assemble and you rest from doing other stuff. Well, let's look and see if there's anything else in the Torah, first of all, that meets those qualifications that's not listed in Leviticus 23. And we're going to start here in Numbers 28, 11 through 14. In the beginning of your month, you shall offer a burnt offering unto the Lord, 2 bullocks and 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without spot. 3 tenths dill of flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil for 1 bullock, and 2 tenths dill of flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil for 1 ram. And a several tenths dill of flour mingled with oil for a meat offering unto 1 lamb, for a burnt offering of a sweet savor, a sacrifice made by fire unto the Lord. And a drink offering should be half a hin of wine unto a bullock, and a third of a hin for a ram, and a fourth of a hin unto a lamb. This is a burnt offering every month throughout the months of the year. Okay, so first thing I want you to notice, every month you're going to have you have one. Now, this is the first day of the first month of the month. Every month, this has an appointed time, and again, the same place as the others. These offerings have to be done where the priest is at. appointed time to meet with an appointed place. Now we're going to look at another case, Leviticus 25, 1 through 5. And the Lord spoke unto Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, and saying to them, when you come to the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, in 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in the fruit thereof. But the 7th year shall be a Sabbath year, a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath of the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor plant nor prune your vineyard. That which grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, neither gather the grapes of your vine unto rest, for it is a year of rest unto the land. Okay, so notice this. So now we've seen before there's a weekly, or a couple of 1 week long, one was 1 week and one was 8 days, which was really, again, a 7-day one followed immediately by 1 day holiday, appointment. We looked at 1 day appointments. So this is a 1 year, this is not an annual appointment like those were, or a monthly appointment like for the new moon. This is a year, this is a 7th year of every 7th year appointment. This is a Sabbath that's not a day long like the weekly Sabbath, but a year long. And you're to let the land rest, just like you rest. And there's more rules which we're not going to go into now, but you get that. But the point is, it is an appointment, even though the word appointment's not been used in any of these places. Let's take a look here at Leviticus 25, 8 through 11, and continue on. And you shall number 7 Sabbaths of years unto you, 7 times 7. And the space of 7 Sabbaths of a year shall be unto you 49 years. And you shall cause the trumpet of Jubilee to sound the 10th day of the 7th month, and the day of atonement. You shall make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And you shall haul the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the habit and all the habitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee in you, and you shall return every man to his possession, and you shall return every man to his family. And a jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you. You shall not sow, neither reap that which grows of itself, neither gather the grapes of it for your vine unto rest. Well, perhaps in future time I will go into this for more deep. But notice this is just as remember Shavuot or Pentecost. You had the 7 Sabbaths, then you had an extra day tacked on, making an eighth day out of 50 days. You had 8 days that were Sabbaths. Well, in this case, the same thing. So you have an extra Sabbath. So the 49th and the 50th year, you're not reaping or sowing. The point is, the land, it's another year-long appointment. The appointment lasts a whole year. It happens every 50 years. So there are definitely appointments that God gave in the Torah besides the ones in Leviticus 23. Now we're going to look outside the Torah and see what else there is out there, because some of these appointments are actually cogs. The word cog is it's meaning basically a religious celebration, and the Greek word in the Septuagint is doka, which always means a religious celebration. Very precise there. And only 3 of these appointments are actually cogs. And those are the 3 when the people of Israel had to stand before the Lord. The men of Israel had to stand before the Lord 3 times a year. First fruits, Pentecost, and tabernacles, which were all harvest festivals, by the way. So those are the only 3 actually called cogs. Now, cog is a religious festival, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But you could argue these are cogs, even though they're not actually called cogs, because they are a religious celebration. But we're going to look at another, and we're going to look at another. We're going to drill into one of these appointments. It's not the word appointment is not actually used, but plainly is an appointment, and see how it's also a chag, and that is the new moons. We're starting with 1 Samuel 20 and 5. And David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon. I shall not fail to serve the king at meat. But let me go, that I may bide myself in the field until the 3rd day of even." Okay, So notice they got this thing where they take off and they we're told Nehemiah they actually rested the people at least around Jerusalem, and they have a feast. So they have a little feast, a little festival on the first month, the first day of every month. Well, you might say, well, okay, and it apparently starts sometime during the Judges. Someone might say, well, okay, David did that, but let's just see if there's more to it. Is that all they did? Well, let's just take a look. Isaiah 1, 11 through 14. To what purpose is the multitude of sacrifices to me, says the Lord? I am full of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of beasts and bread, fat fed beasts, and I am not delight in the blood of. I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of lambs or of he-goats. When you come before me, who has required your hand to tread my courts? Bring no more vain obligations. Incense is an abomination to me. The new moons of the Sabbath, the calling of the assemblies I cannot away with. It is iniquity, even a solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They trouble me. I am weary to bear them. Okay, I want you to notice, first of all, he clumps the new moons and with the appointed feasts, and notice that all these, they are appearing before him. They are assembling, having a holy convocation, including the new moons. Again, a calling of assembly that includes not just the Sabbaths, but also the new moons. So, we have all these characteristics of a cog there, even the word cog's not used. Well, let's continue to look. We're going to look forward, not backwards, but forward to when Messiah is ruling, and see what goes on with see what happens to the new moon there. Thus says the Lord, the gate of the inner court that looks towards thee shall be shut the 6 working days. On the Sabbath it shall be opened, and the day of the new moon it shall be opened. And the prince shall enter by the porch of the gate without, and shall stand by the porch of the gate, and the priest prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings, and he shall worship in the threshold of the gate. And he shall go forth, and the gate shall not shut until evening. Likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the door of this gate before the Lord in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. Okay, so notice in the future here, the people of the land, does that apply to everyone, just people living in the land of Israel, Jew or Gentile, whether grafted in or native born, are going to appear. And you might say, well, why? Because, well, look, transportation's improved, and it's going to be better under Messiah. In Yeshua's day, it was 3 days walk for a lot of people, maybe something even 4, to walk from about 3 day walk from the far end of Israel to Jerusalem. Well, if you can't do that, if you can't practically do that every month, let's just assume that the first day of the month happens to overlap on the Sabbath. Make it easy. 3 days going in, you rest on the new moon / Sabbath. You return. That's a week out of every month gone. You don't have enough time to do your crops and everything. But in the future, but today it's totally doable. You can drive from one end of Israel to another in about 2 hours if the traffic treats you kind and you don't have any problems. So you could, even drive to Jerusalem in, say, about an hour or so. And there'll even be better transportation systems under Messiah, no doubt. Better innovation will come. So then the people in the land will go before him on the new moons as well. And notice also on the Sabbaths. And that Sabbaths could refer to those holidays because they're also called Sabbaths. The appointments are also called Sabbaths because, as we saw, but it could actually refer to the weekly Sabbath as well. So there's no doubt that even though the new moon is there's no instructions about meeting. You have to meet every week under the Torah because it was impractical. The commandments of God are not heavy. He doesn't give you things you can't do, but things you can. And they started doing it. The people who lived in Jerusalem, at least around Jerusalem, started taking a day off and fast, and taking the day off and treating it like a religious festival. And it's going to be definitely made one by the time Messiah reigns. So there's no doubt we can have a chag the size of the 3 they're called chags in the Torah. Then we're looking at another example of some chags. They're completely outside. They're completely outside the Torah. We're going to start here with 1 Kings. These all concern Solomon. 1 Kings 8, 1 through 3. And Solomon assembled the elders of Israel, and all the heads of the tribes, and the children, and the chief of the fathers of the children of the king of Israel, unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, they might bring up the ark of the covenant out of the city of David, which is Zion. And all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto King Solomon the feast in the month of Atonement, which is the 7th month. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priest took up the ark. Okay, so we see here Solomon has an assembly. He assembled them. And the men of Israel, all the men of Israel assemble themselves. They started with just the elders and their heads, but all of them get there. In which the month of Atonement, which is the 7th month. Now, so everyone comes. Now, this month, notice this is the first, this is not no longer called 7th month. It is the 7th month. There's an explanation. But Atonement. And what is that? Well, during the reign of Solomon only, the names of the months used by the Hittite, used by the Philistines and the Zidonians and so on and so forth, were used. Now the priest determined the month by the Urim and Thummim originally. He just asked God at the end of the 28 days, and is tomorrow the month gave a new month or not? They knew the blow the trumpet or whatever, and and have the or not, but. Of course, the Zidonians and the Hittite and the Sidonians and the Philistine stuff didn't have that, so they went off a system of observation because they were not connected to the God of Israel. And so they declared the month when they observed a new moon. Of course, the problem with that is it can be like a couple of years ago in Israel. On the 7th month for trumpets, it was hazy and overcast, and they didn't see the whole month. They didn't see the new moon to a month after. A week after the null moon, and by then it was a quarter. It was a quarter moon. So so of course then they fall back to calculation. Well, they can't be more than 30 days, so they go in there. Well, Solomon's the only one who does this. All these months with these names based on calculation are only during the reign of Solomon, because he married those foreign wives. And this, by the way, is also this where the Sadducees got their system of observation, which some people today still use. Like later they're descendants of the Karaites, like Nehemiah Gordon is a Karaite. They use a system of observation. And again, it has roots in idolatry. Now, we're going to look some more about this. But nonetheless, it stands. 2 Chronicles 7:1-4. And when Solomon made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifice. The glory of the Lord filled the house. The priest could not enter the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord filled the Lord's house. When all the children saw how the fire came down, the glory of the Lord came upon the house, they bowed themselves to the face of the ground upon the pavement and worshiped and praised God, saying, "For he is good, for his mercy endures forever." And all the king and all the people offered sacrifices before the Lord. Okay, so Solomon calls this holy assembly plainly with the sacrifices, and Yah puts a solid stamp of approval on it. He sends fire down from heaven. The Shekinah, the visible presence of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, if you prefer, fills the Lord's house. Solidly puts a stamp of approval on this, but it wasn't in the Torah at all. In fact, we're going to see very plainly it wasn't. We're the rest of the details with the timing of this. In 2 Chronicles 7:7-10. Moreover, Solomon hauled the middle court of the yard that was before the house of the Lord. That for there he offered burnt offerings, the fat of the peace offerings, because the blazing altar which Solomon made was not able to receive the burnt offerings and the meat offerings and the fat. Also that time Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, in a great congregation, for the end of Hamath under the river of Egypt. And the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. On the 3 and 20th day of the 7th month, he sent the people away in their tents, glad and merry in heart for the goodness the Lord had shown to David and to Solomon, to Israel his people. So, notice this. It's 2 days. It's 2 7-day feasts. He added a whole week appointment. He had a whole week solemn assembly. And again, Yahuwah, Yahweh, however you prefer, God, put his approval upon it. So just because an appointment's not a cog's not listed as one of the appointments in Leviticus 23. First of all the appointments in the Torah are listed in Leviticus 23. It's just the only ones where the word appointment's used. Not every appointment has to, not only can you make any other appointments with the Father, but you can have cogs, religious holidays as well outside those. Plainly, again, the stamp of approval of the Father was upon this. And notice that second week was the week of tabernacles we talked about, was the tabernacle. So he tacked on another week for dedicating the altar in front of it. And that's the one where the fire came down and gave the double thumbs up for the fire in the Shekinah. Okay, so I think we can safely. So now let's look at this. But what about other celebrations? People might say, fine, we can have holy days committed to the Lord besides those in Leviticus 23, because not only is there in the Torah, there's also outside the Torah, and God plainly put a stamp. But what about other things? What about like birthdays, or the 4th of July, or Purim? Back to our thing in here. What about ones that aren't necessarily religious celebrations? Well, let's take a look and see if there's any precedence for that. If the Bible says anything about that, and the answer is yes, it does. Genesis 21, 5 through 8. And Abraham was 8 years old when his son Isaac was born. And God has made me to laugh, so that all will hear me laugh with him. And she said, who has said unto Abraham that Sarah should give children suck? And I have born my son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned. Abraham had great feast the same day when Isaac was weaned. Okay, the Hebrew word is mishta. This word translates feast. This isn't chag. It's in the religious ceremony. It's not moed, not an appointment, an appointed time. It's a mishta, which just means a celebration. He made a great celebration. Or let's go look at another example. Genesis 29, 21 through 22. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, I may go in unto her. Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and they made a feast, again a mishta. Well, this again is that same word, and a celebration. Now, some people said, well, that was before the Torah was given and whatever, so on. Well, let's go flip way forward a couple thousand years ago, and let's look at another example of a mishta in action. Luke 15, 22 through 25. The father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe and put it on him, and bring a ring and put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, and bring here the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry. And his elder son was in the field, and came and drew nigh the house, and he heard music and dancing. Now, I didn't go into it, but I've wrote a blog post called Celebrate, where I go deep into this, much deeper than what I go into here. And this would take me several hours if I covered everything I write about in the blog post at the pace I go here. But music and dancing are associated with worship, okay? I just want to note that. This is plenty of mishta. They're having music and dancing. They're having a feast. They're gathering people together. Notice, it's not just the fire. It makes all the servants show up. They're all dancing. Everyone's having a great time except the elder son, which, you have to read the story. This is a story commonly referred to as the story of the prodigal son. So, but notice, and it's proper and right they did this because they have something to celebrate. When you have something to celebrate, it's worth celebrating. And, birthdays they kept track of them plainly some way in the Torah. And the easiest way is just on your birthday, on the day of your birthday, that same day of the year, have a little celebration and count. Because it's important. Because when you're 20, you're now no longer a child. You're no longer there's a change in your status. You're no longer, before you think get away the day before, you can't now get away, but you also have more responsibilities. You have more rights and responsibilities. And one of those is join the army if you're not in the tribe of Levi. And likewise, you can only, at a certain age, you got to drop out of the army. Well, how are you going to know that if you don't keep track of people's age? And it wasn't like they had a calendar like us, and I could just calculate and say, well, I was born in this year, and it's this year, and I subtract and come up with a number. No, they kept track of it. And a common way was to have some sort of birthday celebration, which all you're saying is, I thank you. Everyone's celebrating you made it another year. They're glad to have had you another year. Now, I know there may be some pagan customs some people have adopted into them, but we're going to get into that next, okay? Because they're not the only place there's maybe some pagan customs been drawn into. We're going to look into that right now here in Deuteronomy 12:29 through 32. When the Lord your God cut off the nation before you, where you go to possess them, and you succeed them and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you be not snared at by following after them. Follow them after they have been destroyed before you, and what they inquired, that you inquire not after their gods, saying, how these nations serve their gods, even Saul do likewise. You shall not do so unto the Lord your God, for every abomination to the Lord, which he hates, they have done to their gods. For even their sons and daughters they burnt in the fire to their gods. Whatsoever thing I command you, observe to do it. You shall not add thereto nor diminish from it. Now, often the people that say all this stuff about I've been of course showing it's not true. They are just looking at verse 32, not even taking it in context. And in fact, we've just seen examples where God himself gave approval to an actual cog, where mishtas were done. And they, in fact, have violated verse 32 by adding a law, a man-made law on top of his law. Nowhere in the Torah does it say you cannot have other celebrations. Nowhere does it even say you can't have other hogs. What you can't do is make an appointment on God's behalf, on Yahuwah's behalf. But we plainly showed he put a stamp of approval on hogs and on celebrations. On religious celebrations and regular celebrations, family celebrations, like marriages. So in context, what's this say? It's about taking in the customs of other from idolatry. And those are even been applied, as I referenced earlier, to those appointments in Leviticus 23. Rosh Hashanah is from idolatry. The Babylonians had a 2 New Year's a day, one being the first month, coincided roughly with the Babylonian name, was roughly the same as the first day on the calendar, the biblical calendar. And they had another one, the 7th month, coinciding most time, day or two of the original. Well, eventually they adopted them, and that's why you see like Nisan and so on and so forth. Those were calculated. And these calculated ones were from Babylon, because again, they didn't know the Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So on the month, they wanted to know ahead of time so they could, plan and whatever. So they calculated it. And they basically did it not on the actual new moon, not when it was observable, but on the null moon, when it actually went totally dark. In the day, we still do that. When you see a new moon on a chart, you're technically looking at the null moon, which technically is just a moment when it's completely dark. But to the naked eye, it's dark. Well, the earliest it was ever seen was 15 hours after it went null. But generally, it's not seeable until 21 hours and 15 minutes after in Israel. So the system that was used by Yeshua's time was again, because the Urim and the Thummim were lost in the Babylonian captivity. So now the priests couldn't ask God that way. They came with a system of when they calculated when it would be observable. The earliest to be observable and go with that, which solved the problem of when you can't see it because of the clouds or whatever. So, but there's many of these things. Like in Purim, the rabbis teach people to get drunk till they cannot tell the difference between Haman and Mordecai. The Bible plainly teaches us not to get drunk throughout the whole thing. And many other and they call it Simchat Torah, so Shemini Atzari, and they have this whole procession where they go around and they start going around inside the synagogue, and they go out in the street and they carry this Torah scroll out in the street and parading it. And it's an exact replica, except they're using a Torah scroll instead of an idol, of a ceremony they had in Babylon. So we're not to adopt Babylonian customs in worshiping God, in fulfilling His mission, fulfilling His appointed days or any other days. And for this reason, we're not to observe other holidays that are in honor of other gods. That's the important thing here: in honor of other gods, like Christmas. We'll apply it to the birth of Jesus. The original holiday was in honor of other gods, and I talked about that extensively in the darkness of Christmas. So now, and the main reason people have done this is, some people have done this out of ignorance or repeated someone else said, but the main reason people have used this and just ignored 29 to 31 here about this being not bringing things to idolatry is they are trying to draw disciples after themselves. They want to add man-made rules, just like the Pharisees did. Remember, God's commandments are not too heavy for you to carry. It says in the epistle, one of the epistles of John. I think it's 1 John. But Yeshua said the Pharisees made it too heavy to carry. Their commandments were too heavy to carry. And that's what these people are trying to do when they try to add a rule about you can't celebrate. So go out and celebrate weddings, birthdays, whatever. And anything that's worth celebrating, particularly when it's God, just don't celebrate holidays or towards other gods. And in the celebrations of His appointed days, and in any kind of other holy celebration you might have in His honor, do not bring in pagan customs. Customs from idol worship, that is to say. Now we're going to drill down into the book of Esther and get to Purim specifically. Esther 8:13 through 17. And the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province is published to all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts that rode upon the mules and the camels went out, being hastened and pressed by the king's commandment. And the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the Lord in royal apparel of blue and white, with a great crown of gold, with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and every city, wherever the king's commandment as decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a glad day. And many people in the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Okay, so now this is leading up to Purim. And for those who haven't read the book of Esther, the backstory is this really bad guy, Haman, is convinced of the king on a certain day to kill every Jew in the Persian Empire, which is huge. And the king can't actually reverse his law. Once he makes the law, he can't undo it. But Esther, who we're going to look at later, Esther gets him to create another law saying, well, when they can defend themselves when that happens. So they had a part. I mean, everywhere they went, they have a party, man. If that isn't worth celebrating, I mean, they've been taken from a hopeless situation, looks like certain doom, to the ability to come out of that alive. They're happy. And notice many people in the land became Jews. But the fear of the Jews fell upon them. They became Jews by circumcision. Now notice, that means they were non-Jews. They weren't descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're people of the land. Of what land? Persia. They're Iranians, we'd say today. So the celebrating brought about people coming into relationship with the Father. Let's look at 9, at Esther 9:15 through 19. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also of the month of Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's province gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew their foes 70 and 5,000. But they laid not their hands on the prey. In the 15th day, on the 13th day of the third of the month of Adar, on the 14th day of the same day they rested, and made a feast of a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were Shushan assembled themselves together on the 13th day thereof, and the 14th day thereof. On the 15th day of the same they rested, and made a feast of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the village which dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and sending portions to one another. Okay, there's a lot in here, but we're going to start here with the 14th day of the month of Adar, which is the 12th month. If you read the whole thing, you know it's the 12th month. Well, Adar. Okay, this is that I talked earlier about this Babylonian months. The Pharisees, because they didn't have the Babylonians calculated. The Pharisees made a little tweak because they wanted to actually build the day they thought reason they thought maybe would see that we may or may not see the new moon, but they adopted this calculated system. And today the rabbis come from that today. Came from the Pharisees. All rabbinic Judaism comes from the Pharisees. They make no bones about it. They're proud about it. And if we looked at the previous ones, not all Pharisees were bad. Paul himself was a Pharisee. However, what's bad is the doctrine of the Pharisees. Paul ditched that. And part of that doctrine was you have to calculate the day. And part of the problem is the day the calculation is off so much that one year, I believe it was 2013, in Israel, because they didn't have a late month when they should have, they had one when they shouldn't have, I'm sorry. They ended up having Passover after all the barley harvest was over. So, and the facts on the ground literally disagreed with their calendar, and they couldn't bring themselves to admit after 1900 years, there's a little imperfection of calendar, they drifted far enough to make that big of a difference. You know, tradition makes the word of God of no effect. So I want you to notice here, I want you to notice what they're celebrating. On the 14th day, and the 13th day, on the 14th day, and then the 15th, and the 14th day here in Shushan, they missed some the first day, and the king said, okay, you can kill those who try to kill you another day. So they want to make sure they get all of them. And I want you to notice, they're not out after their stuff. They make this very plain. From the king on, they're making everyone know we're just doing this to save our own lives. We're not trying to get the king to let us kill people so we can take their stuff for ourselves. Like Nazis, like Hitler encouraged the neighbors of the Jews turn them in. So, and if you did, you got their property. No, this is not what's going on here. This was self-defense. And this is people who meant to do them harm, getting them first, a preemptive strike, if you will. No, so they can have some peace and security. And they had a party, a day of feasting and gladness. Now, if this is not worth having a feasting and gladness over, I don't know why it is. And notice they sent portions of one another. So they gave each other, they made sure everyone got food, just like in the Feast of Tabernacles. Everyone's going to join. We're going to make sure everyone has food and drink to celebrate this with us. Okay, well, let's look on forward in Esther. Esther, now we're going to actually Purim itself, 20 and 23, 9, 20, 23. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews that were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish among them that they should keep the 14th day of Adar and the 15th day of the same yearly. As the day wherein the Jews rest from their enemies, the month was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, from mourning to a good day. They should make them days of feast and of joy, and of portions, sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and Mordecai had written unto them. Okay, so what we got? So look at this. Again, appointment, a certain appointed time. You know, the word appointment is not here. And notice it's days, portions, and gifts to the poor. You want to give gifts to the people during a celebration? It's totally legit. Want to give someone a birthday present? Go ahead. There's many examples of people giving presents to other people in the Bible. You're not violating the Torah somehow. Again, don't let anyone bring you under condemnation, adding laws to God's laws that were not there, and making your life hard in an unnecessary way. Do not let them bring you under their dominion. Keep yourself only under the dominion of Messiah. And so, appointed days, appointment. And we got days of feasting and joy. I mean, just, and again, this kind of like harkens back to Passover. There's not necessarily assembling together like in Passover. It's in people's homes. And they have this, so they're doing this. Now, Mordecai wrote this, and it should be yearly. He made it a yearly appointment. And notice they give gifts to the poor. So again, giving gifts is a totally fine way to celebrate. Esther 9, 24 through 27, we're going to look at some more about this. Because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them and cast pur, which is the lot, to consume them and destroy them. When Esther came upon the king, he commanded by letters this wicked device was devised against the Jews should be turned upon his own head, and he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, all the words of this letter and of that which they have seen concerning this matter in which they have come unto them, the Jews ordained, took it and came upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves to them, as should not fail, they should keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to the appointed time every year. Now, this is written in Aramaic, not Hebrew. But that Aramaic word would be translated into moed, appointed time. And again, what are they celebrating? They're celebrating Yah's deliverance of them, through a woman in this case. Just as Messiah would come through a woman, the seed of woman would deliver us from destruction of the enemy. Through a woman came deliverance from destruction of a terrible enemy. And notice this is not just for Jews, but those that join themselves to them. You don't have to be Jewish. A lover of Jews is good enough. A lover of Israel. And if you're a believer, you've been grafted into Israel anyways, according to Romans chapter 11. Romans 9, 10, 11 make it very plain. And Paul's other writings too. You have been grafted, not just Paul's, by the way, Peter's as well. You have been grafted into the people of Israel. This is for all of God's people. This is for Jews, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For those who became Jews, like we saw earlier, and through circumcision, and those who joined themselves to Jews through Messiah. And again, it's a yearly appointed, a yearly moed. Because we should be remember, this is not just about their, it's about deliverance, it's about our deliverance. Esther 9, 28 through 32, we're going to wrap up Purim. And these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city. And in these days of Purim should not fall among the Jews, or the memorial of them perish from their seed. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew were with all authority to confirm his second letter of Purim. And he sent letters unto the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with words of peace, of truth and peace, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according to Mordecai the Jew, as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen have adjoined them, and as they decreed for themselves for their seed in matters of the matters of fasting and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim as was written in the book. Okay, now first of all, I want you to notice some things here. First of all, I want to touch on this fact here. It's every generation, every family, it's not just for Jews. Back then in the Persian Empire, it's Purim. Now in America, some people say Purim. They put an O instead of a U there and pronounce the I like a short I. But in Israel, it's Purim. Depends who you ask. So that's the first thing I want you to know. And also this thing, national holiday. It's across the country. Nothing wrong with national holidays and national celebrations, like the United States is delivered from tyranny. Nothing wrong with the 4th of July being observed for us celebrating that day. Nothing wrong. A memorial. A Memorial Day for us in Israel, to get us as a Memorial Day, to remember those who fought in war to keep for our benefit, for our freedom. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. Nothing wrong with a day of thanksgiving to the Father for all he's done for us, for a bountiful harvest and preserving us for another year. Do not let anyone bring you under condemnation for these things. These things can be appointed by the ruler. Mordecai was ruler over the Jews. You'll find in chapter 10, made ruler over the Jews, was the prime minister of the Persian Empire. So the government can certainly declare these things. So I'm going to say again, go out, celebrate Purim in all good conscience. Just don't adopt wicked, simple things in it. And the costumes is fine if you want to wear it. Just don't be wearing scary costumes, kind of like Halloween or whatever. Ones that, again, are joy and light, as it talks about in the story of Esther here, in day and gladness. Happy costumes. In Israel, Leitzasan, the clown, is one of the most common ones, because clowns are happy, okay? Unless you got phobia of clowns and they're scary. But anyways, so do not let them condemn you. Do not become followers of men. Be followers of Yeshua. Consider the whole word of God and read it for yourself. Till next week, shalom.